Hi everyone, welcome back to the Perkins Custom Swimbait channel. Appreciate everyone taking some time to watch today's video. In today's video, the key thing that I want to talk about is fishing line and specific knots that I personally use when I go out swimbait fishing. So in my last video, I kind of had referenced that I've kind of updated a few things with my fishing line. One of the key things that I've been experimenting with here recently is the braid to leader and kind of how I've been going about that. So I had actually a question during the comments of that video that it was, just curious about how long my leader was, how I was doing things. And I wanted to just go ahead and make a specific video as to kind of how I've changed things up and then some of my line updates, because I do have an old video for fishing line for swim baits that I was using. But like everything, we change, we update, and we try new things. So I wanted to give you a new update on some of the lines that I'm using and then specifically which knots that I'm using. Especially relative to, for example, the braid to leader knot. We'll talk about that shortly, but let's get right into the line and kind of go from there. All right, so to kick this off, this is definitely so to kick this off, let's start with what I would consider the best all-around line if you've got maybe like just one setup and you don't want to have to worry about breaking off baits as bad. This is copolymer fishing line. This is actually the McCoy Extra Clear. I've got this in 15 pound. Now that's personally what I throw, or at least that's what I enjoy throwing with like your maybe 1 to 4 ounce baits. Once you get up above 4, I do switch to 20. A lot of people actually prefer throwing like 20 and 25 pound. That's a personal preference. I like the way that 15 pound allows my bait to sink at the rate that I want it to. So I'm using this line in conjunction with the sink rate of the bait to be able to get the proper depth that I want. And because I've used this line so much, I can pretty well gauge it as far as getting the right, rate of fall that I'm wanting out of the bait to where I can kind of keep it where I want it in the strike zone longer. If you end up using like a heavier, thicker gauge line, you create drag in the water, which actually causes the bait typically to stay up higher in the water column if you're using like a copolymer. So copolymer is not as bad to float as like what mono is, but it definitely has more of a floating property in it than it does like fluorocarbon, which sinks. And then braid, you can braid's a little bit of both. Braid does still want to float a little bit on the surface, but you can buy like sinking braids now. So it just depends on which part of the water column you're trying to target. And that's another thing that we'll kind of get into. But if I had to say all around, go to for a beginner, for somebody that doesn't want to spend a ton of money on line too, copolymer is a great option, whether it be McCoy, P-line. P-line is a great line. I've heard really good things about Iser line. I haven't had a chance to use that, but I've heard really good things about that too. So different kinds. And if you want to go into the mono game and actually stick with mono, there is like the big game 30 pound, like 600, 1200 yards that you can get for like $10 to $15 at Walmart. So if you're going for the economical side of swim baiting, maybe you only have one setup, that's definitely some good options. But for me personally, if I'm rigging up a rod that I want, just a general all around swim baiting, I can throw glides on it. I can throw mag drafts on it. I can throw anything like that. The copolymer line is just good all around line. It works great. You're not feeling terrible to peel off 10 foot of it to try to, retie, and because you got a lot of memory there. Now, so that's going to be one of the reasons that I actually switched to the braid deleter. But before we get there, let's hit fluorocarbon real quick, and then we'll talk braid deleter, because braid deleter is going to be a little bit more time, just because there's a couple of things I really want to talk about as to why I've made the switch. So with fluorocarbon, you know, I've got Sunline, I've got the Daiwa Samurai, I've done Seaguar AbrazeX. You all saw in the last line video, I did use Seaguar AbrazeX a lot. I am branching out a little bit. I'm wanting to try a couple other lines. The other one that I'm really wanting to try is the new Shimano Mastiff, I think is what it's called. I want to try the Shimano line, and then I'm probably going to also try the Daiwa Samurai new fluorocarbon. I don't know if it's the new one, but it's the clear one. I'm not a huge fan of the hidden, and that's a personal thing. I know that Tactical Bassin really likes the hidden fluorocarbon for some of their applications they're using. It's just, it feels like to me, and I've tried it. I mean, I've used it even on jerk baits, trying to see as to how it impacted it. And for me personally, I'm just not a huge fan of it. I guess I look at that like it's brown. It's not clear, and I look at that with my water, and I just keep thinking, if I can see it, I imagine the fish can see it. So it may just be like a mental thing for me, but either way, it's not my personal favorite. I'm wanting to try the actual normal Samurai fluorocarbon that Daiwa makes. I've heard really good things about it too. The key with the fluorocarbon is that if in the wintertime, I use a lot more fluorocarbon than I do in like the shallower months of the spring through the fall. As many of you all know, I do live on highland reservoirs, so my fish could get anywhere, especially during the winter. I mean, anywhere from basically, let's just say 10 to 100 feet. You know, I've personally caught fish out of 80 foot of water before. And I mean, it does a number on the fish. I try not to fish that deep, but still, fluorocarbon helps you get your bait down and keep it down for longer within the strike zone. So it does have its properties. It does have reasons to use it. It's just, I'm not a huge fan of using solely fluorocarbon. Part of that is, I mean, you know, I get into like the economics of this and like how expensive fluorocarbons are. But they make really good fluorocarbons, and that you know, fluorocarbon has its time and its place in my personal fishing. But now if I'm going out and I'm in the middle of spring, I'm really not needing fluorocarbon as much as I'm needing just good quality line. I want fluorocarbon because it will sink, not so much because of its lack of stretch. You know, you all have seen many of my videos. I predominantly am a treble hook fisherman. I throw the mag draft a lot. I throw line through swim baits a lot. I throw glide baits, multi-joints, wake baits. So I'm using treble hooks. So to actually have like very little stretch to like try to set like a beast hook or a giant jig hook bait, I'm not having to do as much as what someone that's trying to set that in like heavy, dense cover, matted grass, lily pads, something like that. They're needing far less stretch than I am. But now that's just right now for me. So, and as you can tell, I'm getting ready to go into braid, which I said during the previous video I never used. Things change. So let's hop into braid real quick, and I'm going to walk through kind of what I do and how I use the braid. So, so I've got different braids. I've got currently on my 8-to-1 that I've been throwing my Jethro on that you saw in the previous video. That was 65 pound, or no, excuse me, that was 80 pound Max Quattro Power Pro braid. I actually ran out, so I don't have that, but you can see the Power Pro. I've got Power Pro. I'm going to experiment with the J braid. This is 50 pound. I'm really not too concerned, honestly, with basically keeping it anywhere from 40 to 80 pound braid. But now I do have specific times and specific baits that I'm wanting to use that for too. It's not that I'm wanting it to just be a one-all be-all of saying, you know, 80 pound braid all the way. I just don't think it's necessary for every single one of the baits. You know, if you'll notice with like a mag draft, they only weigh about 1 ounce to 1.5 ounces. They're not that heavy. You know, you can throw that on a jig rod pretty easily. And honestly, that's actually what I personally prefer to throw it on, because you can skip it a lot easier with that rod. But what I'm getting at is that matching the size of the braid to the bait the same way that you would, you know, any other fishing line. So even though that you can get away with that higher pound braid, if you go with a lower diameter, I personally have found that I can cast farther. So I'm trying to play around with that right now. Like I said, right now on that one reel, the 8-to-1, which it's predominantly only throwing about 4-ounce glide baits. That's what that reel primarily does, is 4-ounce glide baits. And it's working well with the 80 pound to the leader, and we're getting ready to talk about the leader. But it's just that simple. But now going back, I've been using some 50 on my line throughs, and I like it just fine. So it's a push and pull kind of deal. You got to play with it, see what works for you. I've not had any issues recently with a massive like bird's nest in the reel. Now, if that happens and the reel blows up, it's going to be a pain trying to pick the braid out, but I have not encountered that yet. And because the braid is working rather well, I am liking it because of its other properties. So the key thing, and this is the reason I switched from running straight copolymer to the braid to leader. And this is what happened. Early this spring, I got on a bite on a glide bait where it was working the bait about as hard and as fast as I could with an 8-to-1, you know, just quick, real half cuts, quarter turns. I was working that bait really fast over some trees, over some like, somewhat kind of like a ditch kind of area. And I mean, I was having smallmouth come up and just smoke it. I mean, they were hitting the bait hard, they were aggressive. Okay, but what I noticed as a result of this, if I did that for about an hour, that kind of hard turns so fast, I was inducing so much stretch within that copolymer, it would never recoil back. Okay, because it would never recoil back, I was stripping off about 10 foot of line every hour to be able to fish that bait the way it needed to be fished. I was inducing so much stretch, and I was basically breaking a lot of those polymers that were inside of that line to where they would never recoil back. I was also inducing a lot of memory into that line. To look at my line, if you actually would hang it off of the rod and you just lifted the bait up, it would coil almost instantly. And that's why I say the copolymer works great if you're not having to go at like Mach 12 moving that bait. If you're having to go that fast, it becomes a very big challenge to have to maintain that line throughout your day. And that was what got me. I got tired of having to peel off line every hour. By the end of the day, I was down. You know, I mean, just think about it. If you're out there for eight hours, you're peeling off 10 foot of line an hour. That's 80 feet of line. Okay, a Daiwa Tatula 300 can hold a ton of line, but still, you're down a quarter of your spool by the end of the day, and that's assuming you started with a full spool. So you're losing so much line so quickly when you're having to fish a bait that fast. And when you end up getting these chopping style glide baits or something like the bull shad where you burn it really fast, you induce that stretch when you pause, right? You're burning it hard, so it's really taut, and then you pause it, the recoil comes in, and you do this multiple times, this stretch, or stop and go, and that line is constantly stretching. So that's what I ended up having happen to me. So that's why I made the switch. So now on my 8-to-1 that I'm running my chopping glide bait that I can work fast, I'm running braid. I'm running the 80 pound Max Quattro right now. Like I said, I am going to be experimenting with the J braid. If you'll follow on Instagram and Facebook, I'll give some updates as to how I like the dye with J-braid, as well as some of these other lines. I'll try to do little short reels on there. But I'm using Saltimate. This is Sunline Saltimate Shock Leader. I am really liking this line. Okay, I've got like some of the old line that was, I took the, I took the viewpoint of, okay, well, we'll go heavy line, and I was using like 35 pound shock leader. I didn't like it. It was too thick for me. I didn't really care for it. It was just not really my favorite kind of line. I thought it was difficult to manage. That was part of the reason I actually switched to copolymer to begin with. Okay, well now Sunline's come out with this, and that was actually Sunline I was using earlier too. But this is the Sunline. This is some new line. I'm really liking it. This is 16 pound. I'm also running 20 pound. I'm running the 16 pound on like my mag drafts, my 6.5 inch Rising Suns, my like Jethro 6.0, smaller baits, probably in like the 1 to 3 ounce size. I do step it up to 20 for the Jethro 7.5 just because it works fine. I actually have the same line diameter as the 15 pound copolymer, and it's working great. The stretch, so Saltimate Shock Leader is really cool line because it actually is designed to stretch and to recoil. You don't get as much line as you do as like for copolymer, but you get enough line to where you can, you've got enough leader material. So that's all you're doing. You needed leader material. It's fluorocarbon. I'm not worried about the fish seeing it. Because I'm only fishing a leader, I'm not really worried about the fluorocarbon affecting my sink rate a ton. As far as the leader length, I run probably anywhere from 10 to 20 foot leaders. Reason being is I do fish extremely clear water. I reel my leader into the reel. I've not had any issues right now with the knot being able to pass through either the reel, the T-wing, it's a Daiwa, so it is the T-wing, or the guides in the rod. I've not had that issue. But I did change my knot. So originally I tried using the uni to uni knot. It's a great knot, but it doesn't pass through guides that well. It does not pass through the T-wing that well. So right now what I've done is I have been taking the Tactical Bass and the 9 wrap blood knot. That's currently what I'm using. And it's working well. I've not had one fail, knock on wood, but I've not had one fail yet. So, hopefully that will hold and maintain. But I'm really enjoying it. I'm really liking it. I haven't had any issues with it. So if you have any questions more about the line types or anything like that, feel free to put those in the comments down below. So I want to stop now with the actual dissecting the lines and why I've done this. And I want to get into the swim bait knots that I use, how to tie those. So I'm going to set that up, and we're going to go through the knot actual making. I'm going to probably use a very light line because this is just a line that I've got that's in chartreuse. I hope it will show up a lot better on the camera. So as you can kind of tell, you can see that chartreuse, especially against like my blue shirt. So hopefully that will be able to be seen easy, and you'll be able to see some of these knots that I end up using. I'm really only going to show 3. We're going to do a braid to leader knot. We're going to do the 2 knots that I use connecting to baits. And then we'll just go from there. And I'd love to hear what everyone else uses down in the comments below. So let's set up for that, and we'll get right into it. All right, everyone. So the first off is we're going to do the leader to braid connection knot. So here we have our braid, and here I'm just going to use that copolymer mono leader. So the first thing that you do, across our line, we're going to run it 9 times. Perfect. Now, we're gonna run that. You're gonna see exactly how this is. You're gonna run that right down the center. Then next, you're gonna take your braid, run it behind the leader line. There's 6, 7, 8, and 9. That is 9 wraps. And then what you do is you're going to feed this line straight back through that same hole. You're going to feed that through that exact same hole. There we go. That the tag end for the other one is on, and you're wanting those to run opposite directions. Lubricate the line, and then just slowly cinch it in. And there you go. That's exactly what you want to see. Now, with a little bit more of a solid line, can't get it to focus in that great. There we go. You can see that you got your tag ends running on either side, and you got wraps above and wraps below the knot. So that is the 9-strand blood knot, and that is crucial to getting this thing to lay right. But you can see as to how thin this knot is. Now, I am running only 15-pound braid right at the moment to a 15-pound mono leader, but still you can kind of see as to how small that is going to be. We are going to do the other 2 knots that I use predominantly. So, those mainly being what I call the double clinch knot. So, this is our hook eye, easy to see. I will take my line and I will bring it around, and what I do is I will go through the hook eye, or the line tie, that's the better way to put that, the line tie twice, to where now I've got 2 strands going through the line tie. Peeling off a little bit more line. So I've got two strands going through the line tie, and then what I do is I go around it 3 times. I will go through the hoe that I'm holding right here at the line tie. I'll go through that, and I will come back through this hoe that I just created. And that will get cinched. And then I'll just lubricate and run it straight down to the hook eyelet. All right. The last one, I think everyone is pretty well familiar with. I do just use a Palomar knot. You know, if I'm kind of tying something quick or something like that. Typically, I only use the Palomar though. If I'm tying like something small, so like a line through treble, or like a snap that I'm attaching. But for anyone that doesn't know how to do the Palomar, you come through your line tie for your bait or your hook eye, whichever one it is, and you'll basically create a loop in one hand, and you'll have your tag and your main line in the other. So you do have to have quite a bit of line for this particular knot. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of using it with the big baits, is you end up losing a lot. So then what you do is you wrap your loop around your main line and your tag. You go through that hoe that you created, and then what you will do is you'll take that loop that you've still got in your hand and you'll run it around the entire bait. And that's Palomar. So those are my three main knots. Thank you everyone for watching today's video. I really do appreciate it. You know, as you all kind of know, that my area, I'm up in northeastern Tennessee, and our area really got hit hard, devastated with the Hurricane Helene, I believe, that just flowed through. I think that's how they called the name of the hurricane. But our thoughts and prayers really do go out to the people of, you know, basically, I mean, a large portion of northwestern North Carolina. There's so many towns there that got devastated, as well as the northeastern pieces of Tennessee here with the Unicoi County, Irwin, Tennessee. Hearts, thoughts, prayers go out with you all that are really hurting and devastated right now. So really hope everything works out and we can help how we can. But I appreciate everyone taking time to watch today's video. Please, if you've enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. Please hit the little subscribe button down below and turn on that little notification bell for any new videos that come out. Once again, hope everyone's having a great fall and catching a ton of fish, and I'll see you in the next video.